You're standing in Nineveh, or at least what used to be Nineveh. You squint toward the horizon. The late afternoon light settles like warm honey over the ruins. Everything glows the color of old parchment. In the distance, you hear a camel complaining about something, probably taxes. The Tigris River hums softly somewhere behind you, a lullaby for archaeologists and sleep seekers alike. You adjust your imaginary linen tunic. It doesn't quite fit, but let's pretend it does. The air smells like dust, sun-warmed clay, and something faintly herbal. Perhaps someone nearby is boiling bitter tea or burning incense made from frankincense resin and sheer stubbornness. The year is complicated. Let's just say it's sometime around the 7th century BCE, and you're walking into one of the most ambitious information projects in ancient history, the Library of Ashurbanipal. King of Assyria, collector of knowledge, possibly a little obsessive-compulsive when it came to filing systems. The man really loved a good index. You're here to visit the closest thing the ancient world had to a university library and a memory palace rolled into one. Except instead of study carrels and printers that never work, there are clay tablets and scribes with sore backs. Before we begin, a gentle heads up. You probably won't make it through this day. Not because of Assyrian politics or stray chariots, though both are legitimate risks, but because this is a sleep-friendly journey. Your eyelids are going to start weighing more than a fully inscribed tablet on agriculture. That's the goal. So, while you're still with me, go ahead and like this video if the scent of ancient ink is your kind of melatonin. And comment below where you're listening from and what time it is. Let's make this a sleepy little map of quiet corners across the world. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You're standing at the threshold of the North Palace, a magnificent structure commissioned by Ashurbanipal himself. It's enormous, intimidating, really, the kind of place that says, "Welcome, please be impressed." Also, remove your sandals. 2 colossal Lamassu statues flank the entrance. Those winged bulls with human heads and expressions like overworked librarians. Their carved eyes follow you, but only a little. Even mythical guardians get bored. The halls are cooler than the sunlit courtyard. Stone walls rise around you, lined with faded carvings of kings smiting their enemies and receiving scribes. You trail your fingers along a low-relief panel. It's smooth in places. Centuries of sandstorms and admiration have softened the details. Eventually, you reach the doorway to the library. There's no dramatic signage, just a narrow entry marked by a few cuneiform warnings about proper handling of texts. You know, standard stuff. Please return tablets to the correct shelf or risk divine irritation. You step inside. It's dim and quiet. The air is thick with the earthy scent of baked clay. Rows of low shelves, stone or maybe just very determined mud brick, hold thousands of tablets, each no bigger than a paperback but 10 times heavier. You pick one up. It's warm from the sun and covered in dense wedge-shaped impressions. Babylonian script, you think. Or maybe Akkadian. It's hard to tell without a coffee and an undergraduate degree. Here's the first thing most people don't know. Ashurbanipal wasn't just a king. He claimed to be able to read and write himself. Not exactly common in royal circles. Most kings of his time could swing a sword or order a feast, but deciphering omens from sheep livers and reviewing Sumerian literature, that was rare. Also, clay tablets weren't just randomly stacked. They were sorted by topic: omens, medicine, astronomy, incantations, dictionaries, legal codes, and the ever-popular how to interpret dreams involving angry goats. The king had scribes label the tablets and even include references like Part 3 of 6, so you wouldn't lose the plot halfway through an epic about someone forgetting to water their sacred fig tree. One tablet you lift begins with a salutation to the god Nabu, patron of wisdom, writing, and probably the original god of overdue library fines. Historians still debate whether the entire collection was open to the public or just to the court elite. Either way, it's unlikely you'd stumble in here looking for something light to read on a quiet weekend. There's a soft shuffle in the distance. A scribe leans against a wall, rubbing his ink-stained fingers. He looks like he hasn't slept in 3 rains. You nod politely. He raises an eyebrow that says, "I catalogued 112 goat omens this morning, and I will not be helping you find your tablet." You place your tablet back where it belongs, under liver prognostication, Section B, Shelf 2, and wander deeper in. Here's a weird tidbit for you. In Assyria, dreams were considered messages from the gods, but only if they occurred just before dawn. Any earlier and, well, they were probably just indigestion. Behind you, a tiny breeze whistles through a cracked lintel. Dust dances in the filtered light. The walls seem to breathe with memory. You sit cross-legged on a woven mat, gaze unfocused on the spines. Okay, edges of 1,000 clay volumes. The world slows. Sleepiness settles into your shoulders. You wake up, or maybe you never left that fuzzy in-between place, and it's later now. The library glows with soft oil lamp light, flickering shadows across the walls like lazy waves. Someone somewhere is copying a passage aloud, muttering under their breath about those cursed Akkadian verbs. You stretch, joints murmuring like ancient hinges, and continue your exploration. This time, you duck into a smaller chamber, the medicine archive. That's right, Assyrian healthcare, clay tablet edition. No mint tea or chicken soup here. Instead, recipes for treating everything from headaches to spirit-induced bloating. One tablet says, if the patient sees shadows dancing across the wall and speaks in riddles, rub his chest with mashed figs and whisper the name of Enlil into his left ear. It's oddly specific, but you're not here to judge. You trace your fingers over a long, thin tablet. It lists plants used in healing mandrake, myrrh, juniper berries. Some of these are still in use today. Others are, let's say, more experimental. Crushed beetle wings for bad dreams? Bold. Here's your big historical fact of this section. Many of these medical texts were copied from much older Sumerian sources, meaning Ashurbanipal's library preserved knowledge that was already ancient in his time, like printing out a website from 1994 and calling it archival. A soft clink echoes behind you. You glance back. It's just another scribe, balancing a basket of wet clay slabs, their surfaces blank and hopeful. He mutters something about too many demons, not enough verbs. You sympathize. Grammar is hard. You crouch beside a low shelf and find a surprisingly intact series titled Treatments for Afflictions of the Head. It includes both medical and spiritual advice, ranging from poultices to protective chants. One entry recommends placing a smooth stone beneath the pillow, one that has never seen the sun. You're not sure if that means a cave rock or just an exceptionally shy pebble. Obscure tidbit? Glad you asked. Some Assyrian doctors believed that diseases entered the body through the ears. Not quite germ theory, but charming in its own earwormish way. Scholars still debate whether these remedies were actually applied or if they served more symbolic functions, offering comfort, not cures. Much like warm tea and bedtime history videos, you pause at a tablet marked with a star. It's a copy of the Exorcist's manual, a kind of how-to guide for spiritual cleansing. The script is sharp and elegant. Someone took pride in this one. You can almost hear the scribe's internal monologue. Yes, I will center the lines today. No more crooked margins for me. A spider crawls past your foot, unbothered. Even the insects here are studious. You move into the next alcove. This one's quieter still, as if it remembers something solemn. Tablets here aren't about healing or goats. They're prayers, hymns to forgotten gods, long poetic odes to the moon, the harvest, the soft rustle of river reeds. You read one aloud, slowly, your voice echoing against the stone. The words feel worn, like river stones, rounded by centuries of use. The text thanks a goddess for good dreams and safe journeys. It asks for nothing in return, just gratitude, a bedtime prayer before bedtime existed. You sit down again, back against a cool wall. Your eyes close for just a second or maybe longer. Somewhere nearby, a scribe yawns. You're in good company. The library murmurs around you, soft and steady. It's a library, after all. What else would it do? You blink back into wakefulness or something like it, and rise slowly, joints creaking in sympathy with the very old wood of the lintel above you. Outside the hymn alcove, you follow a corridor that seems to lean gently left, as if nudged by time. Your bare feet brush over polished stone, warm in places, cool in others, depending on where the afternoon sun last wandered. You come upon a large tablet standing upright, supported by two modest clay blocks like a very nervous museum exhibit. Its surface is densely inscribed, the wedges neat and uniform. You tilt your head. The topic? Astronomy. Or, perhaps more accurately, how to tell if the moon is angry with you. You read slowly. The moon appears too low? It means unrest in the northern provinces. 2 full moons in a single month? Bad news for sheep. A halo around the moon? Someone's going to forget the king's birthday. Possibly fatal. This was not idle stargazing. The court's astronomers, known as Uparu, watched the heavens as if the cosmos were a very dramatic neighbor. They documented eclipses, phases, and odd twinklings with anxious precision. Some scholars believe these records were less about science and more about celestial diplomacy. If Venus rises early, do not crown your nephew was a legitimate piece of advice. You pull another tablet from a slanted stack, careful not to disturb the fragile order. It's a star chart. Crude, yes, but charming. The constellations aren't bears or hunters. They're lions, plows, rivers, tools and beasts of the empire. Makes sense. When your daily life includes constant crop checks and stray leopards, the sky starts to look familiar. One curious entry mentions a comet with a tail like a reed broom. It appeared suddenly and vanished before the month was done. Historians still debate whether this was Halley's Comet or just a particularly dramatic dust storm. Here's your obscure tidbit. Assyrian scholars believed some stars were actually the souls of righteous kings, promoted to heaven like celestial middle managers. A comforting thought, assuming you had the resume. You hear voices in the next chamber, quiet but rhythmic. A chant? A litany? You step inside and find a group of young scribes practicing recitations. Each sits cross-legged with a practice tablet on their lap. The lead instructor, gray-haired and severely unimpressed, walks among them, correcting pronunciation like a man who's had enough of misread omens this week. You sit in the back, unnoticed, listening. The chant is from the Enuma Anu Enlil, a massive collection of celestial omens. It predicts events based on planetary positions, royal births, military defeats, grain shortages, and whether your cousin's second marriage will be as chaotic as the first. A breeze finds its way in from a tiny slit window high in the wall. The air smells faintly of clay and cedar smoke. You let your eyes rest. One of the scribes nods off midline. No one blames him. You're awake again, but only just. The atmosphere is syrup-thick with heat and quiet. The library has moods, you've noticed. This one is afternoon drowsiness. Even the tablets seem to yawn a little. You find yourself back in a long corridor lined with the oldest, most fragile texts. Some cracked, others crumbling gently into trays of protective sand. This is the Archive of Origins. It houses the Assyrians' most prized literary treasures. You guessed it. This is where they keep the Epic of Gilgamesh. You ease into the room and approach a short platform displaying the opening tablet. The familiar wedge marks begin: he who saw the deep, a hero, a city, a flood, a friend. The themes are ancient and impossibly modern, like a bedtime story that never stopped being relevant. This is your major historical fact for today. Ashurbanipal's library preserved the most complete version of Gilgamesh known to history. Without this clay-bound hoarder's paradise, you might never have heard of the flood myth that predates Noah by a comfortable millennium. You skim over the lines. Gilgamesh builds walls. He searches for immortality. He loses his best friend, Enkidu, and mourns so deeply that even the gods pause to take a breath. The script is elegant, the spacing unusually generous, as if even the scribe knew these words needed room to echo. Obscure tidbit incoming. The flood story in Gilgamesh features a god who panics and hides under the bed when the deluge begins. Divine bravery, it seems, has its limits. Scholars still debate whether Ashurbanipal truly read and loved this story, or if he simply ordered it copied to impress his scribal rivals in Babylon. Either way, we're grateful. The man knew how to collect a classic. You wander over to a tablet describing city construction, specifically how the gods were to be honored at the laying of a city's foundation. There's a detailed account of burying secret objects in corners of the walls, amulets, incantations, and sometimes a miniature model of the entire city itself, just in case the gods needed a backup map. You run a finger across the edge of the display. The clay flakes gently beneath your touch. Time, even in baked form, is a little fragile. A nearby scribe hums to himself as he smooths out fresh clay, preparing a tablet for copying. His hands move with a grace that suggests muscle memory, not thought. Top drog. Top drog. The stylus clicks faintly. You wonder if it's relaxing for him or just endless homework. He notices you watching and grins. Epic again? He asks in perfectly accented Akkadian. You nod. Better than goat omens, he mutters, returning to his work. You sit down against a low bench and close your eyes. The library hums softly. The air shifts. The gods are watching, but only just. Even they seem sleepy. You wake to the sound of styluses scratching clay. dozens of them, perhaps hundreds. It's not loud, exactly, but persistent, like a forest of very well-read termites. The scribes are in full swing, hunched over their tablets in rows, each with a bucket of damp clay and a look that says, "Don't speak to me before I've copied 300 lines of Sumerian law." You wander through the scriptoria, where the library's magic happens. These aren't just rooms for reading, they're rooms for replicating, for preserving, for making sure that if the gods decided to wipe the world clean again, someone could still find a proper recipe for barley beer. Here's today's big historical fact. Ashurbanipal didn't just collect texts. He commanded armies of scribes to copy them from older Babylonian libraries. The king sent letters to other cities asking, politely or otherwise, for their most important texts. Some of those cities complied. Others may have accidentally had their collections relocated during peacekeeping efforts. You sit near a scribe whose job today is to transcribe a list of omens based on animal behavior. It's a long list. Apparently, if a sheep walks backward through your doorway, it's a sign of good fortune, unless it bleats twice, in which case your uncle's roof is about to collapse. Precision is key. The room is warm. You smell wet clay, sweat, and the faintest touch of cedar oil, burned slowly in a corner to keep away insects and bad moods. An obscure tidbit. Some scribes developed a condition modern researchers think may have been repetitive stress injury, clay carpal tunnel, if you will. There's even a phrase in one old letter. His hand is tired. He will continue writing after the feast. Priorities. The scribe beside you pauses to re-wet his stylus. He sighs. "You know," he mutters, "we really should have gone into brick-making. Less reading. Fewer curses." You nod solemnly, as if this were a decision you, too, once weighed. Historians still debate whether all scribes were formally trained in royal schools, or if some learned the craft through apprenticeship. Either way, their handwriting varied, some elegant, some interpretive, like the one you're watching now, who's written what looks like, "The god Ishtar likes lentils 3 times in a row" before catching the error. You try not to laugh. He glares at you. The room is full of sounds. Stylus on clay, quiet sighs, the occasional muttered curse, mild and fully divine appropriate. It's the soundtrack of preservation. It's the lullaby of legacy. You lean back against a wall and let the rhythm wash over you. Top, drag, top. The day melts just a little. Later, how much later, who knows, you find yourself outside again. The courtyard is golden with late sunlight. A small fountain gurgles, fed by a channel carved from limestone. The water burbles with the unbothered energy of something that doesn't know it's part of an ancient irrigation marvel. You sit on a bench, stone, warm, with a cushion that's probably older than your modern hometown. You're not the only one seeking a break. A pair of scholars argue gently over a translation of a particularly vague verb. One of them insists it means to rise, while the other's convinced it means to burp. Both might be right. The Akkadian language had a way of multitasking. You close your eyes for a moment and take in the sounds of the courtyard. Birds nesting in the roof beams, footsteps over gravel, the faint clink of a ceramic cup being set on a low table. Someone nearby is drinking date wine. You wander to a low shelf near the edge of the courtyard and find a collection of texts dedicated to etiquette. That's right, the Assyrians had opinions about proper behavior, and they were happy to write them down in painstaking detail. Your historical fact for this section. Among the many topics stored in the library of Ashurbanipal, There were instructions on how to approach a king, how to behave during a feast, and how not to annoy your host by asking too many questions about the soup. Social life in ancient Assyria had a script. One such tablet reads, "Do not sit before the one who has not yet sat. Do not eat before the eldest has taken bread. Do not insult the cook, for he serves the will of the house." Simple rules. Timeless, really. And here's your obscure gem. There was apparently a belief that sneezing during a banquet could mean you had just received a message from the gods, or, depending on the guest list, a sign that you were about to be served the spicy lentils. Interpretations varied. Scholars still debate whether these etiquette texts were meant for nobles only or were also taught in scribal schools as part of general education. Either way, it's nice to know that even 2,700 years ago, people needed to be reminded not to double dip. The sun begins to sink lower. A soft breeze lifts a corner of your tunic. The courtyard fills with golden silence, the kind that makes you forget where your to-do list is and why it mattered. You lie back on the bench, one arm behind your head, the other lazily tracing patterns in the dust. Sleep isn't far now. Even the gods seem to be winding down. Evening spreads across the courtyard like spilled ink, slow, velvety, and faintly blue. The air cools. Somewhere a bell rings 3 soft times. Not to summon anyone, not to warn, just a polite announcement that the sun is going to bed now, and you may want to consider doing the same. You stretch and stand. You've noticed the rhythm of this place by now. It doesn't run on hours or bells or sand-filled clocks. It runs on mood. Light breeze, the weight of eyes. The library breathes, and you've been breathing with it. You find your way back indoors, this time to a quiet side chamber near the back of the archives. It's a room few visit. The walls are lower, the ceiling arched and painted in once bright colors. Ochre, green, dusty blue. This is the section devoted to letters. Not official decrees or royal boasts, but real correspondence. Letters between scribes, merchants, priests, even 1 or 2 addressed to the king himself by particularly brave poets. You sit cross-legged in the glow of an oil lamp. Before you lies a tablet inscribed with a message from a son to his mother. He writes from a northern village, probably near what's now the Turkish border, and complains about the barley shipment being late, the cows being uncooperative, and his brother, still unmarried, being a general disappointment. Here's your historical fact. Many tablets in Ashurbanipal's library weren't just scholarly or religious. They were letters, copied or archived, capturing the texture of everyday Assyrian life. Arguments, complaints, love notes, supply orders. They were human before they were historical. You pick up another tablet. This one is more formal. A merchant listing goods he's delivered to the palace. 3 baskets of dried fish, 5 jugs of palm syrup, 1 mildly stolen goat. You raise your eyebrows. The word borrowed has been crossed out. At least he's honest. Obscure tidbit? There was a polite formula Assyrian writers often used to open letters. May the gods keep you healthy, and your city full of clean water and loyal scribes. Priorities. Historians still debate whether some of the letters included in the library were meant to be archived permanently, or if scribes just hated throwing anything away. Some theories suggest these letters were used to teach writing. Others say Ashurbanipal just really enjoyed reading gossip about provincial grain disputes. You find 1 tablet with a pressed fingerprint in the corner, possibly accidental, possibly intentional. Either way, someone once touched it with clay on their hands and no idea you'd be sitting here, all these centuries later, wondering whether they sneezed when they sealed it. The lamp crackles slightly. You lean your head back against the wall, tablet resting in your lap. The words blur into lines, then hums, then nothing. The day outside slips from deep gold to velvet black. You wake with the peculiar alertness that only ancient stone walls can give, a kind of semi-startled awareness that you're very much in a place designed for serious thinking, but also serious napping. The library accepts both with grace. A low torch flickers outside the chamber. You follow its glow into a wide, round room. The walls curve in on themselves, and shelves spiral inward, like a clay labyrinth for introverted scholars. This is the lexicon room. You run your fingers along the labels, words for animals, plants, gods, months, metalworking tools, mythical sea monsters, eyebrow styles, all carefully defined, all cross-referenced in languages you barely remember from the dream you had 3 nights ago. Here's today's historical gem. Ashurbanipal's library included bilingual and even trilingual dictionaries, Akkadian, Sumerian, and sometimes Hittite, used to help scribes navigate the tangled grammar jungle of Mesopotamian scholarship. Think Rosetta Stone, but heavier and with more cuneiform. You pluck a tablet at random. It defines the word for to shine and gives examples. The moon, polished bronze, a well-fed priest's forehead. Useful. Obscure tidbit. The Assyrians had different words for wise silence and awkward silence. A culture that truly understood social nuance. Another tablet lists compound words, river eye for spring, mountain teeth for craggy cliffs, sky belly for thunderclouds. You wonder how many scribes tried to sneak jokes into the lexicon. Surely, somewhere, there's a word that translates to accidental camel embarrassment. A scribe drifts by, carrying a tray of drying tablets. He hums tunelessly, the way someone does when they've worked for 14 hours and know precisely how many more they have to go. You nod in solidarity. He blinks, then continues down the spiral like a very literate ghost. Scholars still debate whether these lexicons were actively used by scribes or compiled for the king's personal amusement. Either way, the effort was monumental. Think of it, a world where library science literally involved actual, physical science to prevent your dictionary from cracking in the sun. You find a bench built into the stone and sit. Around you, thousands of words whisper from their shelves. Not loudly, not urgently. Just enough to say, "We're here. We've been here. You're doing just fine." The torch gutters low. You rest your head against the stone wall and close your eyes. You dream of a tablet that only says "rest now" in 100 softly carved languages. You wake up slowly, like bread rising in a clay oven, warm, heavy, and slightly confused about your surroundings. But the library is patient. It waits. It has waited for over 2 millennia, so it's not going to rush you now. You're back in the lexicon room, but the light has shifted. A new torch burns, casting long amber shadows on the walls. You decide to follow one of the branching corridors leading from the spiral chamber. Your bare feet make no sound as you walk. Even the air feels hushed, as if the words stored here are dreaming. You step into a room that smells like ink. Not the fresh kind, but the ghost of it, bitter, earthy, and strangely reassuring. This is the scribe's tools chamber. It's not glamorous. No golden artifacts. Just racks of styluses, drying trays, clay mixing basins, and dozens of tools that all seem designed for poking, scraping, or smoothing. Today's major historical fact. Assyrian scribes used styluses made from reed, bone, or metal, and had at least 4 different tips: thick, thin, flat, and angled. Each mark had to be pressed precisely to make the correct wedge. Writing cuneiform wasn't just literacy, it was choreography. You watch an apprentice practice on a spare slab. His brow is furrowed, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. He presses a line, leans back, scowls, and smudges it with a sigh. "It looked better in my head," he mutters. We've all been there. There's a worn tablet on the wall, a kind of scribe's cheat sheet. It shows the difference between similar wedge formations, along with helpful examples. One symbol means star. The nearly identical one, fish. Misread that, and someone's divine omen turns into a seafood menu. Obscure tidbit. Scribes occasionally carve tiny images or jokes into the edges of their tablets. Nothing scandalous, just sleepy owls, miniature sandals, or one memorable caricature of a very unimpressed sheep. You pick up a stylus and try it yourself. The clay pushes back gently. It's not easy. Your first wedge looks like it sneezed. The second one is better. The third? Well, let's not talk about the third. Scholars still debate how standardized scribal training was. Some believe there were official schools attached to temples or palaces. Others think training was more informal, father to son, master to apprentice, tablet to forehead. You place the stylus down and dust your hands. There's a comfort here, a rhythm. Mistakes are expected. Corrections are part of the art. In a quiet corner, someone's carved a phrase into a slab of clay drying near the window. You read it aloud. "The gods forgive crooked lines." You decide you like this very much. Now it's nighttime, properly so. The stars are out, and the moon has taken her place above the courtyard, glowing like a polished tablet in the sky. You step outside for air and find a bench near the garden, where fig trees and jasmine bushes offer their scents in sleepy plumes. It's peaceful here, away from the clay and cataloging. The library breathes differently in the dark. Less studious, more reflective. You imagine the gods, too, taking off their sandals and reclining somewhere, letting their divine scrolls rest for a few hours. You wander back inside, this time into a chamber near the rear, one with thick walls and no windows. This is the sealed room, contains the special texts. Not dangerous necessarily, but intense. These are incantations, laments, ancient hymns to goddesses of war, rain, and stubbornness. Your historical fact: Ashurbanipal's library housed ritual texts used by priests, diviners, and exorcists. These included Siptu, incantations, Namburbi, rituals to avert omens, and other ceremonies to protect the king, the palace, or even a particularly unlucky garden gourd. You pull a tablet from the shelf, heavy and cool in your hands. The inscription begins with the phrase, "When the moon forgets to rise, and the dog's star barks at midday." A poetic way of saying oh. The rest of the tablet outlines a ritual involving flour, a bronze bowl, and the quiet whispering of the victim's name into river water. It's elaborate and a bit theatrical. Honestly, it sounds like something a moody teenager would invent after reading too many scrolls. Obscure tidbit? There's a documented ritual involving pouring beer over a small figurine to drown a bad dream. Experts remain split on whether this was symbolic or someone's excuse to drink before noon. Scholars still debate whether these texts were widely used or mostly ceremonial. Some believe they were copied for preservation. Others say they reflect a real and constant fear of the divine unknown. Either way, the line between medicine and magic was blurry, and sometimes slippery with beer. You return the tablet to its place. Carefully. The room feels full not with people but with intention. These tablets were written with purpose, and their purpose still echoes. Not threatening, just attentive. You whisper a thank you. For what, you're not sure, but it feels polite. Outside, a night bird calls softly. You follow the sound down a hallway lined with sleeping benches. Small mats, low cushions, and carved cubbies. Even scribes need naps. You lie down and feel the weight of knowledge all around you. Not heavy, not oppressive, just present, like a blanket made of old wisdom and dried clay. Your last thought before slipping under is, I should write this down. Morning arrives with a yawn, not a trumpet. The library doesn't do dramatic sunrises or loud announcements. Instead, it stretches awake through beams of gold dust slicing softly through high windows. The air is cooler now, faintly citrusy, as if someone somewhere peeled an orange purely for scent. You're in the scribe's dormitory, or rather, still curled on one of the narrow benches tucked along its edge. Around you, others are slowly stirring. One man groans theatrically, clutching his back like he's just carried the entire Epic of Gilgamesh across town. Another reaches for a clay mug filled with what smells like barley coffee. Bitter, strong, suspiciously nutritious. You rise, stretch, and wander into the corridor, guided now by the sound of quiet conversation and the occasional hiccup of someone who tried barley coffee too quickly. Today, you find yourself in a room that's more whimsical than others. A surprise. Really. This is the Dream Archive. Here's your major historical fact for the day. Assyrians believed dreams were divine messages, and they recorded them meticulously. Ashurbanipal's library contained dozens of dream interpretation texts, many of which connected symbols, like snakes, rivers, or missing sandals, to real-world events like floods, wars, or regrettable haircuts. You approach a low shelf labeled with the sign for night visions. The tablets here are smaller, more personal. One begins, if a man dreams of a goat chewing dates, he will receive news from a distant friend. Another, if a woman dreams of a house with no doors, she should not speak for 3 days. You raise an eyebrow. That one feels oddly specific. Obscure tidbit? In some versions of the dream texts, the gods were ranked by how likely they were to send dreams. Nana, the moon god, was considered the top-tier dream dispatcher. You imagine him now, sitting at a celestial desk, rubber-stamping dream memos with a sleepy smile. You read another tablet aloud. It tells of a man dreaming that he's climbing a tree, only to discover it's growing upside down. The interpretation? His fortunes will reverse. The note adds, in a slightly exasperated tone, if he dreams this again, offer incense to Nabu and stop asking questions. Scholars still debate how these interpretations were actually applied. Some think priests handled the decoding. Others believe individuals were expected to self-interpret, using the tablets like a divine user's manual. Either way, It's comforting to know ancient people also woke up at 3 a.m. wondering what that dream about flying geese and melted sandals was supposed to mean. You linger in the dream archive a while longer. It's easy to lose track of time here. The room feels a bit floaty, like your feet aren't entirely committed to the floor. You lie down once more, head resting near a carved block labeled Night Messages. Maybe you'll dream too. Maybe the gods will send you something gentle. But for now, sleep hovers, and the dreams belong to someone else. You wake in a new room, or at least it feels new, though the stonework suggests it's as old as anything in Nineveh. The light here is dimmer, filtered through thin alabaster windows. You're surrounded by statues, small ones portable, all facing inward as if convening a very quiet council. This is the room of offerings. Not a temple exactly, but a space where sacred objects and associated rituals were archived on clay. Every figurine here once had a story, and every story was written down. Offerings weren't just about the gods, they were about documentation, receipts for devotion. Today's historical fact: the library of Ashurbanipal contained records of temple offerings, what was given, by whom, how often, and sometimes what happened when someone accidentally forgot. Spoiler: the gods noticed. You walk past a set of tablets organized by deity. Nabu has a tall stack, Ishtar even taller. One entry reads, 3 bundles of myrrh, 2 goats, and a string of copper bells given at the new moon by a kill, who fears dreams and requires comfort. The scribe even added a doodle of a bell. Obscure tidbit: some gods were thought to prefer particular items not because of power or value, but because of taste. For instance, the goddess Aya reportedly favored finely combed wool. Why? No one knows. Maybe she just appreciated softness. A tablet near the center of the room describes a ritual for the forgetting of a quarrel. 2 people would offer dates and beer at the temple steps, then read aloud a short poem about letting go. You read it now. It ends, "Let the river take the word. Let the seed grow elsewhere." Scholars still debate whether these rituals were practiced widely or only by elites. Either way, they offer a rare window into emotional life. Reminders that even ancient kings and priests sometimes had to say, "I'm sorry," with fruit. You sit beside a statue of a lion-faced god holding a small bowl. There's a tablet tucked beside him. It simply reads, "He listens." You close your eyes. The air smells like ash and honey. There's peace here, born of repetition and reverence. You're not sure how long you stay, but when you finally rise, the room seems warmer. Somewhere, a bell rings again. One note, soft as breath. You walk slowly now. There's no rush. The library has shifted into its late-day rhythm. Slower than slow, like syrup seeping down the edge of an old jug. Your footsteps make soft pats against the floor, and the stone seems to exhale with every step, as if even the walls are tired in the best possible way. You find yourself in the archive of laws. The room is orderly, with narrow rows and shelves labeled by city, not subject. These aren't philosophical texts or personal letters. These are codes, rulings, contracts, decrees from long-dead kings who really wanted people to stop stealing goats from the wrong side of the river. Here's your historical fact. The Library of Ashurbanipal preserved not just literature and science, but civic records. Legal codes, some dating back to the earlier Babylonian kings, were stored, copied, and referenced. This included land disputes, contracts for laborers, and rules for temple donations. Ashurbanipal wasn't just hoarding poetry, he was archiving society. You sit in front of a slab listing fines for various offenses. One reads, "If a man borrows a donkey and returns it lame, he shall pay 2 shekels and 1 song of apology." You try not to giggle. There's no footnote for how long the song must be, but you imagine at least one verse about proper hoof care. Obscure tidbit? There were clauses in some marriage contracts specifying how many loaves of bread a husband was expected to provide his wife each week. And if he failed, she could return to her father's house with dignity, and probably a smug note from her mother. A scribe nearby is cataloging what looks like a property line dispute involving fig trees and a mysteriously mobile fence. He sighs, adjusts his clay palette, and mutters, "Always fig trees, never olives. No one ever fights over olives." You give him a sympathetic look. Boundary drama is clearly eternal. Historians still debate whether these law texts were ceremonial, practical, or simply preserved out of sheer administrative pride. Some suggest they served more as reference, reminders of order, than binding law in every corner of the empire. Like very old sticky notes with impressive authority. You pause beside a particularly smooth tablet. The inscription begins with, "Let there be clarity between neighbors, even when fences walk." You take a seat and rest your back against the cool wall. You picture a man arguing with a priest about land measurements while a goat eats the survey flag. Civilization has always teetered on the edge of polite absurdity. The light outside the window softens to amber. Another hour slips into the library's long breath. You close your eyes and listen to the quiet, lawful hum of memory. You've almost walked every hall now, every chamber, every archive. The library has shaped itself around you, gently and without ceremony, as if you've always been part of its dusty, sacred rhythm. You find yourself once more in a room without a name. Small, round, and plainly built. There are no shelves, just a circular bench and a shallow basin in the center, filled with water. Above, a hole in the ceiling opens to the sky, and the moon peers through like a librarian checking the late returns. This is not a reading room. This is a remembering room. You sit on the bench, your fingers skimming the surface of the water. Still and warm. You lean in and look down. For a moment, you expect to see your reflection, but what you see are words. Not real ones. Just the idea of words. Their weight. Their intention. This is where the memory of memory lives. Today's final historical fact. The Library of Ashurbanipal wasn't simply about preservation. It was an active project of identity, of defining what should be remembered, and by whom. It housed not only texts, but the machinery of memory. The scribes, the rituals, the order, the ink. Obscure tidbit? A few of the tablets found buried in the ruins were wrapped in cloth, placed in clay jars, and buried under floors, deliberately hidden. Some believe they were time tablets, meant for future generations, or for the gods, or for us. Scholars still debate the purpose of this final chamber. Some call it symbolic, others call it speculative architecture. But everyone agrees. There's something sacred about a space designed just for sitting still. You stay here longer than you intended. Maybe longer than you've stayed anywhere else in the building. The silence here isn't empty. It's full, layered with every word, every breath, every ink stroke ever made in this palace of thought. You whisper just once, "Thank you," then rise. You walk back through the hallways, past the dream archives, the language rooms, the shelves of stars and goat omens, past sleeping scribes and murmuring scholars, past the stone lions who never blink. The exit stands open, its great lintel casting a long, calm shadow across the floor. And still you do not leave just yet. Outside, the moon is high. The stars shimmer like tiny, ancient wedge marks across the dark. The Tigris sings faintly in the distance, its waters gliding past reeds and fish and the bones of forgotten docks. You sit on the steps of the North Palace, feet warm against stone worn smooth by centuries of sandals. Behind you, the library breathes. Its windows flicker with torchlight. Its walls hold the murmurs of thousands of voices, some remembered, some recorded, some only imagined. You think of Ashurbanipal, king, scholar, occasional hoarder of astronomy scrolls. He could have built another throne room. Instead, he built this. You wonder if he, too, ever sat out here under the stars, letting the hum of knowledge soften into silence. Maybe he even took off his sandals. You breathe deeply. The air smells like night. Let your shoulders relax. The library is behind you now, but it's also not gone. It lingers, like the scent of baked clay on your fingertips or the soft tick of a stylus echoing somewhere in your chest. A rhythm, slow and steady. Top, drog, brit. Above, the stars remain where they've always been, drifting slowly, patiently, with more time than any of us will ever need. And the moon, still watching, still writing poems on the backs of clouds. You imagine the lamassu at the gates settling in, their wings folded, eyes finally closing. Even guardians deserve to rest. Somewhere, a tablet dries on a tray, its final line pressed with care. Let this be remembered, but it doesn't shout. It just waits, content to be found or forgotten with equal grace. You breathe again, slower now. The night is quiet but never empty. The wind carries a whisper of ink and incense and fig leaves. Let your mind drift, like a small boat on the Tigris, unmoored and unhurried. There is no destination now, only floating, only stillness. If your eyes are heavy, let them close. If your thoughts are tangled, let them unfurl like old scrolls in soft light. The library of Ashurbanipal is 1,000 years gone, but it is also with you now. Its tablets breathe in your memory. Its stories curl behind your ribs. The scribes hum lullabies in languages you've never learned, but somehow still understand. Sleep comes not as an order, but as an invitation. And now, you are gently, deeply, beautifully gone.